Welcome to Behind the Blue Curtain. This is your all-access pass to Sarasota Opera. We'll uncover stories, behind-the-scenes perspectives, and explore the magic that happens both in front of and behind the blue curtain. My name is Martha Collins. I'm the Director of Education here at Sarasota Opera, and I'll be your host today on our inaugural episode, Opera 101 at 100. Joining me now are Maestro DeRenzi, the Artistic Director of Sarasota Opera, and Richard Russell, the General Director of our company. I'd love to kick off with, what can our audience expect for our 67th season? What can they expect to see?
We are quickly approaching our fall season. First of all, we are doing one of the great operas of the repertoire, which is Mozart's opera Così fan tutte. But also we are doing our youth opera, which is Brundabar, which has been an extremely popular work, not only with our audience, which is important, but also for the children in our program, because it's something they have come to connect with greatly. We've done, this is our third production of this, and the material in this is very important for our kids, and it's very important that they get to know some of the history that we are presenting in this production.
Richard, what can we expect in the winter?
Well, our Winter Opera Festival is the core of what we do here at Sarasota Opera. We've been doing it for, 60-something years. And we're starting with probably the most popular opera in the repertoire, Puccini's La Bohème. Certainly one that a lot of people know from movies. It's a great, great piece, and a piece that we've done often and that our audience loves. And then we're doing an operetta. An operetta, for those who may not be aware, is a piece. It's kind of like a musical because it has set numbers that are sung and also spoken dialogue. And it's The Merry Widow, which is another very popular piece, well-known title, and I think people are really going to enjoy it. And then, Maestro, why don't you talk about our next opera, because it is your specialty?
Yeah, we're doing Verdi's opera Il Trovatore, which is maybe one of the most popular performed operas throughout its history. At a time, if you wanted to do a parody about opera or talk about opera, you usually fell onto Il Trovatore. The Marx Brothers parodied it, and Gilbert and Sullivan parodied it. And the reason they could do that is not because of the story, but because it was so popular and everyone knew the story of Il Trovatore. And many people know the music for Trovatore. Even if you don't know opera, you certainly know, you've heard a lot of Il Trovatore.
Closing out the season,
we have an American opera by a composer named Carlisle Floyd. He taught at Florida State University for many years, and a really wonderful composer who visited us several times. And the work we're doing is Susanna, which is his most popular opera, and it's probably the most popular American opera that's been performed. It's a story about an Appalachian tale. It's based on an apocryphal story from the Bible, but it's about a young woman who doesn't fit into her society and is condemned because of it, and is taken advantage of by a man. But it's a beautiful piece, wonderful music to it, very accessible music, which I think people who think contemporary opera are concerned about that. But this is a piece that, if you know a gospel tune, it's very much a part of this piece, Susanna. And it is a piece that this company has a long history, because we first did it in 1971, and then again in 1973. It was the first opera I think we did with full orchestra. And this is the first time we've done it since then. So it's very exciting, and it's the 100th anniversary of Carlisle Floyd's birth.
And it's important to us, with Richard and I, as we put the season together, that we have contrast within our season, because Susanna can be a very devastating opera in terms of the storytelling. But on the other hand, for our audience, some of them will have seen that and then go and see Merry Widow. If you see the four operas within a month, you really get four different stories told in different ways.
So I know that certainly since COVID, a large percentage of our audience members or our audience attending have been new to our company. And there's been many who come to our opera for the first time to give opera a try. So joining me now are Lauren and Candice Henry, two sisters and the co-founders of Aretios, a Sarasota company specializing in leadership training for young professionals. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you. We're excited to be here with you, Martha.
Thank you.
Your first full opera was here at Sarasota Opera. Can you tell me about that and what inspired you to come?
Sure. So we had been introduced to little tastes of opera over the years through our grandparents who used to love to go to hear the opera at the Met, but we had never seen a full-length opera. And so it wasn't until we were invited to be a part of the DaCapo Society that we went to our very first full-length opera at the Sarasota Opera House. And it was amazing to see it come alive with the sets, the costumes, all of the music, the live orchestra, everything right there. And we just really, really enjoyed that experience.
We were blown away, actually, to see the depth of what it takes to put on a full-scale production. And we were so impressed by the quality of the performers and the sets and the costumes and everything that Sarasota had to offer here right in our local backyard.
Well, I'm so glad to hear this. We love our theater because the acoustics are so good. But, I used to go to the Met all the time, but I was in the cheap seats. So there's nowhere in our theater that you don't get a fantastic view of the stage.
I agree. We've sat all over, and every time we still feel that same immersive moment where you're just caught up in the music and what's happening on stage. You can see from wherever you are.
And did you say what that first opera was?
It was Carmen.
It was Carmen. What a great first opera. The music's so endlessly beautiful. And so what do you say to people who might buy into that prejudice or stereotype about opera that it's not for everyone or elitist? What would you say to them?
I would say opera is for everyone. And I think that young people especially would be surprised at how accessible it is and how everyone can find some element of the performance to relate to, whether that is something in the music that you really enjoy or just appreciating the incredible level of talent that's here. And you can follow along with the storylines that's all in the program for you. And so it's a lot easier to understand what's happening than you might think.
I think what was also interesting for us as young people was to see that many of the performers on stage were around our age. They are young people who come from all over the world, very talented people that Sarasota Opera brings in, some of the very best. And they're here performing. And so we had the opportunity through the DaCapo Society to meet some of them and then learn what the opera world is like from somebody who is an opera singer. And that was really neat and made it even more fun for us to connect with fellow young professionals who are on a stage right there and get a glimpse into their life.
And you mentioned the synopsis in the program, but of course there's the super titles above the screen. So you know exactly what everyone's singing about.
And there's a lot of humor in the lines that is really fun to follow along. You're like, wow, there's so many little hidden gems as you go throughout. And we're just so impressed, too, with the level of these performers and how they can learn all of this beautiful music and sing in another language, and everybody can still follow along with the story.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and so many emotions that they bring to these stories. You, as you said, you can laugh, you can weep, you can think about other people's lives. Is there an opera you're most looking forward to this season?
Ooh, I'm not sure yet.
I would say La Boheme would be really fun to see. That was actually one of our grandparents' favorite operas, and we've never seen it. So I think that would be very special to get to see that in a full-length production. We've heard bits and pieces, but to see the full thing would be pretty neat.
Well, ladies, you are in for a treat because there's nothing like a good La Boheme, and we've got a fantastic cast for you to enjoy. I love your enthusiasm, and I look forward to seeing you at the opera.
Yes, we'll see you there.
Now, back to Richard and Maestro. Maestro, what was your first opera experience?
I got to opera a little earlier than many people do. It was in 1963. I was in school on Staten Island where I grew up. And one of our teachers built sets for a small opera company. And he kept bothering a bunch of us to come and see the opera. And we all just spoke among ourselves and decided it would be a good idea to see the opera. And then we could tell him we went to the opera and he would stop bothering us. We wouldn't have to go again. So when I said he built sets, he actually put 4 pieces of wood nailed together with cardboard on it and painted it. It was a very small company with no orchestra, no chorus, terrible singers, costume pulled out of a trunk or a suitcase the afternoon of the performance, and it was Verdi's La Forza del Destino. And I decided, we all went back to school, and everyone said, "Thank you so much, Mr. Andriano, for inviting us, but this isn't for us." And then I got hooked almost immediately. I started buying recordings. I helped him build the sets. I joined the chorus. I did anything I could to be in the world of opera, which was, to me, a very special place and still remains a very special place. To be in a different world with different people and part of that world by making music and bringing it to life for our audience.
Part of so many different worlds. It's always new. It's always different. What about you, Richard? What was your first experience?
Well, I was quite young as well. I was in the 5th grade, and I had a wonderful music teacher. Her name was Annie Evelyn Ryan. She's from the South, but we lived just outside of New York City, about a half hour away. And she loved opera. And she was a subscriber at the Met. She would go on a regular basis and talk about it. And she decided in the 5th grade to do a module on opera. And it was the opera Carmen. And and of course, this dates me, but I think all of you may remember some things that they used to have called film strips, that she showed film strips of a production of Carmen from the Metropolitan Opera with a recording. And I was just taken with it. I was excited by it. And so that same year, they took us for a field trip to Lincoln Center and backstage at the Metropolitan Opera. And I was just, okay, I've got to get me some of this. So I convinced my mother to take me to the opera. She had a friend who was very involved at the New York City Opera Guild at the time, and she arranged for us to get tickets for Carmen. And that was my first opera, and I was hooked. And my mother and I used to have a regular date. We would go on Saturday afternoons to the New York City Opera. We had a subscription, and it was how I learned to love this art form.
Mine was my voice teacher had arranged for me to be an extra or a supernumerary in the opera. And those are the people that you need in a production to tell the story. So maybe they're the servants or the soldiers. And we were guests at a party. And of course, I just couldn't believe the beauty and power of what I was hearing, and I was hooked ever since.
Let me back up, Martha, by what you said. I have a feeling you were probably the worst super in the world, because instead of acting the way you were supposed to, you were probably standing there listening to the music.
Actually, you know what? It was Ariadne of Naxos, and we were guests at a party, and we were supposed to love it when the Commedia characters were performing, and then be not so interested when the opera performers were performing. And I, of course, loved it all. So I arranged with the wig people to put my very large hat on in a way that I never had to fall asleep while I was on the stage, but I could watch everything that was going on.
It sounds like Martha to me. Over the years, I've gotten to believe that you can only really love opera when you see the whole thing and the beauty of the whole thing, the orchestra, the chorus, being in a theater. And yet neither of us first became in love with opera in that situation. We moved on to that, right, Richard? But we both kind of, you fell in love with film strips and the story and some music probably on a phonograph. And I fell in love in a company doing terrible productions. Nonetheless, it captured us.
But I remember my parents got me a recording of Carmen, and I listened to that in my room before we went, and I learned it. But going into the theater and hearing an actual live orchestra do this with singers in the same room making sounds, I don't know if they were great or not, but they moved me. I think you're right in that being in the opera house with that experience, that makes all the difference.
You know, I love interacting with audience members, as I know both of you do before every show, and finding out their stories and why they've come to the opera. And as I said, we have so many new people, whether it's women who are coming through the Tuesday Opera Women's Network, our town club, or the DaCapo Club, which is our young professionals, or who have just given opera a try. But what would you say to people who are not sure, they're reticent, they've maybe heard some of the preconceived preconceived ideas about opera that maybe it's elitist or it's too hard to follow, what would you say to those people about giving opera a try, and especially here at our opera house?
At one time in our history, opera was all around us. It was in movies, it was on television, it was on the front of Time magazine or Life magazine, it was on the radio. So it's very easy for someone to casually bump into an opera, so to speak. And because it's not so much, I think it seems like a bigger jump from society than it really is. People have this idea about what opera is. One, I don't understand it, which I think we've dealt with well because we have super titles. So you can understand it as much as you can understand a French movie or Italian movie or German movie.
And for anyone who doesn't know, the super titles are projected above the stage. So really you can follow everything going on.
The other thing is that people assume that it's expensive, and it certainly is not. And people are concerned sometimes about how you behave, and we want them to respond to the opera. They don't have to get dressed up if they don't want, but they can. A lot of people love to come to the opera and make it a big event and wear, a tuxedo and a shirt. But we're a beach town, Sarasota. So if you're coming off the beach, we welcome you.
I think there's lots of opportunities for people to enjoy the art form. The thing that annoys me the most is somebody said, well, opera is just not for me. It's just not my thing. And I'm like, well, which one did you see? No, I didn't see it. I haven't seen an opera. And I think you have to do that. I think you need to be in a theater and try the experience. Not everybody's going to like opera. Of course not. And there are people who don't like to go to the theater, and people don't like to go to a ball game. And I think we all have our own experiences that we enjoy, but to give it a try, getting dressed up, I think that's part of it. I remember the first youth opera performance I went to here at Sarasota Opera, and I had just started, I think, as marketing director. And I said, well, it's a youth opera. I'm going to dress down. I'm going to be more casual. All of these little kids are wearing their little suits and little tuxes and all. That's part of the experience. And I like, there was a survey done with an opera company in Colorado and asking young people, do they prefer coming more casual or do they want to dress up? And they said, no, we want to dress up. It gives us permission to be fabulous. And I think that's a great quote. I think being unafraid to try it, and if you don't like it, fine. But if you may find that you're drawn into it, you may find that, okay, there's this impression that opera is an elitist art form, and we try so much to break that down because it's not. It's always had some element, even though it was started by noble people and it's been supported by the aristocracy, it's always had an element of being a popular entertainment.
And I also think, especially today, that our society is so splintered. Sarasota, the opera, I was going to say Sarasota Opera, but any opera is the one place you can go. It doesn't matter what your religious belief is. It doesn't matter what your political belief is. Nobody really cares. I've seen people on the extreme left talk to people on the extreme right and just share this experience, or very religious and non-religious. But this is an experience that everyone can share and be part of. I also think one of the things that we mention is that we came to opera because someone else introduced us to opera. And I think it's very important for people who love opera to realize that that's part of our job, is to bring new people into the opera, whether it's your child or your grandchild or your neighbor. The odds that somebody's going to walk past the opera house and go, gee, I've never done that. Let me see. Oh, okay, maybe I'll do it. I'll buy it. It doesn't work that way. It works by somebody sharing their passion and their interest with you. And I think we need to do that. And opera lovers in general need to remember that that's part of their responsibility.
Well, and opera is such an incredibly rich art form that, as you know, I'm one who firmly believes that it's the greatest art form because it's the one that brings all of these other art forms together at their highest level. So the visual arts of the sets and costumes, the orchestras playing incredibly beautiful, difficult, unique, powerful music. We've got a libretto that is in its own way a work of art. The libretto is the words that the singers are singing, which is treated in its own, was created as a work of art of its own. So I find that no matter how many times I see an opera, there's always something new that I couldn't pick up before because there's so much, you can focus on and take in. And so I find that so satisfying as an art form that continually enriches you by what it gives you when you go to the performance.
Also, Martha, I would add that it's a pretty diverse and rich repertoire. And you may not like an opera, but it doesn't mean you don't necessarily like all opera. There are different kinds of opera that appeal to different people. I know people who are Mozart fans and they're going to love Così fan tutte, but they don't necessarily like operetta. On the other hand, some people like things that are lighter and in English. So that appeals to them. That speaks to them. And of course, something like La Bohème, which is so richly romantic and touching and all of that. And then there are people who, we're not doing any of that this season, but who love Wagner, who don't mind sitting through a 5-hour opera in German with a dense libretto, which I think is fabulous. But nevertheless, I know some people who don't like it. And I know some people who are so passionate about it, they'll travel the world to see it. So it's such a rich repertoire. We have so many opportunities.
I think of the analogy of food, that not everybody likes all food, but some people like French food, Italian food, Mexican food, whatever it may be, but you still eat it. You eat something, and if you do come to, as Richard said, you come to an opera and don't like it, we all share operas that we love, and we often don't share operas that we don't love. We all don't love different pieces.
This opera has been thriving and moving people for centuries. So it's for a reason.
Love it. So opera is an expensive art form. We know that, right? It costs a lot of money. We have to raise money. Tickets sales don't cover the costs and all of that. And I got into a discussion with one of our donors, one of our patrons, and this was over a drink at a bar. And they had a friend. And we were explaining the whole thing about how we have to raise money and to cover our costs. And the friend said, well, clearly your business model is broken. And my response is, yes, and it has been for 400 years. It's always the way that opera's been, but the art form thrives, and I think it will always thrive. I think it's going to continue. And I am not a naysayer. These people who say audiences are declining, Maestro, you and I have heard the same thing. Oh, we only have older people in the audience. And that's not true. We have a lot of diverse people in the audience, but you know what? We've heard the same complaints for decades.
So, moving on to the second part of the title of this podcast, which is At 100. So, the 100th anniversary of our historic building. Arthur Britton Edwards, who built this back in 1926, had a particular vision for how it should serve the community. Can you talk about that, Richard?
Sure. He wanted it to be a community resource, and he wanted it to put Sarasota on the map. He was a real estate person. Florida was going through a real estate boom at the time. There was lots of building. How many buildings were built in Sarasota in 1926? A lot. And it's because there was a lot of attention coming to Sarasota, and he wanted to capture that and create an entertainment venue for the town, a place that put it on the map. And he wanted it to be a community resource, which is why through its history, and especially in the beginning years, there was a variety of different performances. There were movies, there were live performances, and even that first year opera that they brought in a touring opera company. And so it was important that this was a resource right in downtown Sarasota for people to come.
Well, and he clearly was visioning the future because, as my research shows, the population of the city was about 3,000, but the Opera House sat 1,500. So he was really envisioning that this town was going to grow.
Right. So you could do a couple of performances in those days and the whole city could come see it.
Babies and all. So there was a time when this downtown core was actually designated as a slum, because everything had fallen apart downtown, including this building, which was likely about to be demolished before the opera company bought it. But do you feel that the opera company purchasing this building and renovated it had anything to do with the downtown core coming alive again?
Excuse me. No, I don't feel it. I know it. I know it's true. I don't think it's a matter of opinion. I think we have seen what's happened to downtowns throughout the country, especially to smaller cities. And there is no question, and I'm not even going to say no question in my mind, there is no question that the condos we see, the restaurants we see, the library across the street would exist without the Opera House. You deny that, Richard Russell?
I don't deny that at all. I mean, Maestro, you were here a few years before I first came. I remember when I came in 1989, you didn't want to be downtown. And I've heard that story from lots of people. Downtown was not a place to be. But by opening the Opera House and creating this, destination in downtown, the opera company had vision. It had vision that downtown could come back. And certainly there were a lot of people who invested in making sure that happened. And I think that came to fruition. I think that's why we have such a thriving downtown is the arts community, us, and we have to give some credit to FST as well, because they started about the same time. But that created a thriving downtown.
Richard, you'll remember in those days, you had to have a restaurant you really liked because you went there every night because you pretty much didn't have any choice. No matter, it changed over time, but there was a restaurant that you went to. And then suddenly there was another option, then another option. And suddenly it's downtown as we know it today. I enjoy people. I mean, we're talking about 1982, but I enjoy when people who've were with the company 20 or 25 years ago and they come back to visit for some reason, they have no idea where they are. There's barely a landmark that can show them the place they were in other than the center of that, which is the Opera House.
So, what is the plan to celebrate this anniversary?
We're going to have a big party. We're going to celebrate the theater. We are, during the whole season, we'll be doing tributes to the Opera House. We will do a display about the history. We are producing a book about the history, producing a documentary. And then following the season, we will be celebrating the anniversary. Now, the theater opened April 10th, 1926. On April 10th, 2026, we will have a big open house. We will invite the community. We're hoping to show the first silent movie that was seen in that theater, a movie called Skinner's Dress Suit. And then the following day on April 11th, we're going to have a big celebration, an event in the theater, and then a dinner celebrating it at Selby Gardens.
Maestro, are you going to say anything about the anniversary celebrations?
Well, I am very much looking forward to this celebration, and I'm especially looking forward to the fact that it's 2 days, so that we have a day that everybody is invited to, and not that everybody's not invited to our concert, because certainly everybody is. Everything we do is for our whole community. We want everybody there, but the open house to have people, hopefully, whenever we have an open house, we often have people that have not been to our theater. I mean, that's been our experience in quite a few of the open houses. So we want people to know our theater, to maybe see a part of it. If they've been in the audience, maybe see parts of the theater that they haven't seen and haven't been in.
And there was so much variety performed at the Opera House over the decades, right? Everything from, as Richard said, opera, etc., but Elvis, silent movies. We went into regular CinemaScope movies, community concerts. So it's really hard to honor all of that in just one concert. So to be able to tell that whole history, we need more time to celebrate it.
However, that texture that came with the Opera House is still part of our Opera House today. I mean, it's called an Opera House, and the Sarasota Opera owns it, certainly, and we perform there a lot, but we have a lot of non-opera events in that Opera House. We have concerts of pop music, we have movies that we show. It's rented to all different organizations. So yes, it is Sarasota Opera House, but it is also a really important part of our community. Just so many of the things that you named that are part of our history are still part of our present, still part of our presence.
So, Richard, you've created a Spotify playlist for people for this season. Now, I do seem to remember hearing that you hosted a radio show at some point, so you're familiar with picking different songs, I think, from your own vast collection. So I'm just curious, how did you make your choices? Are these particular favorites of yours, or?
I went through the repertoire for the season, and I picked a representative recording for each of the 5 operas, and there is also, I think, one for Brundabar. But for the 5 operas, I tried to pick a representative recording and some of the highlights from each of the operas. Some of the tunes that somebody might recognize, some of the really, the big moments. Like Così fan tutte, there's, this beautiful trio that I think a lot of people will recognize. La Bohème, obviously the big arias, and Quanto men vo, and in Trovatore, the anvil chorus. So I tried to pick, using some great singers and great performances, some examples from all of these operas that people can introduce themselves to it. And then if they really love it, they can go back and find those recordings on Spotify or Apple Music and listen to the whole work and hopefully come to see it at our opera house.
Richard, where can they find this podcast?
So please come to our website at sarasotaopera.org or any of the sites where you get your favorite podcasts like Apple Music or Spotify. And make sure you visit our website to get more information about all of the operas in our season. You can buy tickets. And if you have any questions, just find our website at sarasotaopera.org.
We certainly also hope you'll join us for podcast number 2, Così fan tutte, Duplicity, Disguises, and Delightful Deception. We'll see you there. Martha Collins signing off.